Chapter 1. The Boy Who Lived and the Letter He Dreaded. The bacon at number 4, Privet Drive, was sizzling with an unnatural shade of purple. Harry Ignatius Potter poked at it with his fork, watching the magical-looking sheen with a familiar sense of resignation. "Just a pinch of powdered mooncalf horn, dearest," Aunt Petunia said, beaming from the stove. She was wearing a frilly apron over her dress, emblazoned with the words "Kiss the Potion Maker." Asterisk, which weekly asterisk swears it enhances the savory notes. And it's meant to improve one's luck for the day. "It's not real mooncalf horn, Petunia," Uncle Vernon grumbled, not looking up from his copy of the Daily Prophet. He held the rustling magical newspaper at arm's length, squinting at the moving photographs as if they might leap out and bite him. "It's ground-up chalk from that mystical Muggle curios shop. But the spirit is there, I suppose. The intent." He cleared his throat and boomed. "The intent is what separates a true wizard from a squabble." "That's a squib, Dad," Dudley corrected him cheerfully from across the table. His considerable bulk was squeezed into a t-shirt he'd designed himself. It featured a crudely drawn picture of Harry's face with a lightning bolt scar, above the words, "H. Potter, more powerful than a locomotive. And I think the potion is working. I found a 10-pence piece on the way to the kitchen." Harry sighed, a quiet, weary sound that was lost in the Dursleys' enthusiastic chatter. This was his life. Not a cupboard under the stairs, not neglect, not hatred. It was something far, far worse. Suffocating, misguided, obsessive fandom. The discovery of the letter on the doorstep 10 years ago had not horrified his aunt and uncle. It had electrified them. The revelation that their orphan nephew was a wizard, the famous Boy Who Lived, had flipped a switch in their tidy, suburban minds. They hadn't shunned magic. They had subscribed to it. The walls of Harry's bedroom, Dudley's second bedroom, naturally, because the chosen one deserved the best, were not covered in posters of rock stars or athletes. They were plastered with moving pictures of the Chudley cannons, faded diagrams of wand movements clipped from Practical Charms for the Beginner, and a truly mortifying, life-sized poster of a brooding Gilderoy Lockhart, which Aunt Petunia insisted was aspirational. His childhood had been a relentless gauntlet of Wizarding World merchandise ordered via owl post, badly pronounced spell practice in the garden. "It's Livosa, not Livove, Harry, pay attention," and the constant crushing pressure to be the epic hero they read about in their monthly subscription to modern magical history. He knew everything there was to know about Hogwarts. He'd had the school's history read to him as a bedtime story. He knew the 4 founders, the name of the poltergeist, and the best way to avoid the trick step on the grand staircase. But it all felt secondhand, a story about someone else that he was unfortunately forced to star in. He had no real connection to this world. It was just the script his family expected him to follow. "Anything interesting in the Prophet, Vernon?" Petunia asked, levitating a plate of purple bacon to the table with a brand new mail-order wand that stubbornly refused to do anything more than wobble. The plate crashed down, thankfully without breaking. "More ministry nonsense," Vernon declared, rattling the paper. "Fudge is waffling on about cauldron bottom regulations. Doesn't he know he should be focusing on the real issues? Strengthening the wards around Azkaban. Proactive hunting of dark wizards. That's what I'd do if I were minister." Uncle Vernon, a director at a drill manufacturing firm, had very strong and entirely uninformed opinions on magical governance. Harry was trying to calculate the minimum amount of bacon he could eat without sparking a lecture on keeping up his hero's strength when the click of the mail slot echoed through the hall. A single envelope fluttered onto the doormat. The effect was instantaneous. Uncle Vernon dropped the Daily Prophet, his face flushing with a sudden, manic glee. Aunt Petunia let out a high-pitched squeal and clapped her hands together, her eyes wide and shining. Dudley scrambled up from his chair, so fast it scraped loudly against the linoleum. "It's here," Dudley roared, his voice cracking with excitement. "I bet it's here. The day has come," Vernon bellowed, striding into the hall with the air of a king approaching his throne. "Petunia, my love, the camera. The commemorative scrapbook." Harry's stomach turned to lead. He had been dreading this day all year. His 11th birthday was a week away, and he knew exactly what that letter was. It wasn't a key to a new and exciting life. It was a starter pistol, signaling the beginning of the Dursleys' Olympic-level campaign of vicarious living. Vernon picked up the envelope as if it were the Holy Grail. It was thick and heavy, made of yellowish parchment, and the address was written in emerald green ink. There was no stamp. Mr. H. Potter. The smallest bedroom, with the most wizarding memorabilia. 4 Privet Drive. Little whinging. Sorry. Look, Petunia. They know. They know we gave him the best room. Vernon's voice was thick with pride. He turned the envelope over and saw the purple wax seal, a coat of arms with a lion, an eagle, a badger, and a snake surrounding a large letter H. Hogwarts, Petunia whispered, her hand pressed to her heart. Tears welled in her eyes. Oh, Vernon. Our little boy is going to Hogwarts. Harry wasn't their little boy. He was their little celebrity. He felt a hot flush of embarrassment creep up his neck as Dudley ran back in, waving a battered copy of Hogwarts, a history. We need to start practicing his entrance speech, Dudley announced. You should lead with a powerful anecdote, Harry. Maybe about the time you accidentally made Mrs. Fig's hydrangeas sing the national anthem. That never happened, Dudley, Harry mumbled, sinking lower in his chair. That was a story from Fantastic Feats of Famous Wizards. Nonsense, son. Vernon boomed, thrusting the letter into Harry's numb hands. Your innate magical talent often manifests in ways you don't even realize. Now, open it. This is a historical moment. Petunia was already there with a gaudy, flashing Muggle camera, the kind you want at a carnival. The flash popped, temporarily blinding Harry and leaving bright spots dancing in his vision. He fumbled with the wax seal, his fingers clumsy. He didn't want to open it. Opening it would make it real. It would unleash a fresh tidal wave of Dursley brand enthusiasm that he feared he might actually drown in. He broke the seal and pulled out the letter. The parchment was crisp and smelled faintly of old books and wood smoke. He read the familiar words he'd seen reprinted in countless magazines. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Headmaster, Albus Dumbledore. Order of Merlin, First Class, Grand Source, CHF Warlock, Supreme Mugwump, International Confeed of Wizards. Dear Mr. Potter, *, we are pleased to inform you that you have a place at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Please find enclosed a list of all necessary books and equipment, *. Term begins on September 1st. We await your owl by no later than 31 July, *. Yours sincerely, Minerva McGonagall, Deputy Headmistress. The flash popped again. Oh, it's beautiful. Petunia sobbed. Just as I imagined it. Vernon, we must frame it. No, we must get a magical frame that preserves it for all time. First things first, Vernon said, puffing out his chest. A celebration is in order. Dudley, fetch the cauldron cake. Dudley lumbered to the fridge and returned with what was, for all intents and purposes, a lopsided chocolate cake baked in a small plastic toy cauldron. Icing, meant to look like a bubbling potion, dribbled down the sides. In wobbly green letters, it read, Congratulations, our chosen one. Harry stared at the cake. He felt a profound sense of loneliness wash over him, so sharp and sudden it was like a physical blow. He was surrounded by a family that loved the idea of him, but he wasn't sure they had ever actually seen the real Harry Potter. The boy who hated being the center of attention. The boy who just wanted to read a normal book or kick a football around without someone asking if he was trying to magically enchant it. The boy who was, deep down, terrified that he would get to this magical school and be a complete and utter failure, disappointing not only the entire wizarding world but, even worse, the 3 screaming fans in his kitchen. The rest of the week was a blur of frenzied preparation. Uncle Vernon took the day off work to lecture Harry on the importance of making a good first impression. You'll be meeting the heirs of ancient and noble houses, son, he'd explained, pacing the living room. You can't just go in there talking about Muggle things. You must assert your dominance early. Find the biggest, toughest-looking wizard in your year and challenge him to a non-lethal duel. It's all about establishing your place in the pecking order. This piece of advice was taken directly from a questionable article titled Wizarding Politics, a Slytherin's Guide to Success. Aunt Petunia, meanwhile, had been trying to brew a wit-sharpening potion using ingredients from the garden and her spice rack. The resulting concoction smelled strongly of boiled cabbage and cinnamon, and had left a stubborn blue stain on the kitchen counter. Harry had managed to pour his dose into the potted geranium when she wasn't looking. Dudley had taken his role as head of security very seriously. He'd spent hours polishing his smelting stick, which he now referred to as his anti-goblin striking staff, and practicing intimidating glares in the hall mirror. Now, on the morning of his 11th birthday, the chaos had reached its peak. A pile of presents sat on the table, all wizard-themed. A self-stirring cauldron that only stirred clockwise, a set of garish green robes Petunia had sewn herself, and a book titled So You're a World-Famous Wizard, A Guide to Handling Fame. Harry was just unwrapping a box of every flavor beans, which the Dursleys had painstakingly tried to replicate using regular jelly beans and odd spices, when a loud boom shook the entire house. A second boom followed, rattling the windows and their frames. Dudley dropped his smelting stick with a clatter, his face paling. "What in Merlin's beard was that?" Vernon exclaimed, jumping to his feet. Asterisk boom. 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 Asterisk. This time the sound came from the front door. Someone was pounding on it with incredible force. "Perhaps it's a ministry official," Petunia gasped, smoothing her apron. "Here to escort Harry personally." "Oh, my hair is a mess." "Stand back, everyone," Vernon commanded, grabbing a heavy brass poker from the fireplace. "It could be rogue Death Eaters. They're always trying to get at Harry." Dudley assumed defensive position Beta 7. Dudley, looking terrified, crouched behind the sofa, holding his smelting stick like a spear. The pounding stopped. A deep, rumbling voice echoed through the wood of the door, easily audible from the living room. "Sorry about that. Doorbell seems to be busted." There was a splintering crash, and the front door shuddered on its hinges, then swung inward with a groan. A man of gigantic proportions stood silhouetted in the doorway. He was so tall his head brushed the top of the frame, and his wild, tangled mane of black hair and beard almost completely obscured his face. He was holding a pink umbrella. Harry stared. He recognized the man instantly from a picture in Great Wizards of the 20th century. Rubeus Hagrid, keeper of keys and grounds at Hogwarts. The Dursleys, however, did not react with fear. Vernon dropped the poker. Petunia let out another squeal, this one of starstruck delight. "It's him," she whispered loudly to Vernon. "It's Hagrid, the one they call the gentle giant of Hogwarts." Vernon's face split into a wide, welcoming grin. He strode forward, hand outstretched. "Mr. Hagrid, sir. An honor to have you in our home. Vernon Dursley. I'm a big admirer of your work with blast-ended scripts. Audacious. Truly audacious." The giant, Hagrid, blinked down at Uncle Vernon's hand, his beetle-black eyes filled with profound confusion. He had clearly expected to be met with a shotgun, not a handshake. He looked past Vernon, his eyes scanning the room, taking in the Chudley Cannons posters, the toy cauldron on the table, and Dudley peeking over the sofa. His gaze was utterly bewildered. "Air right," Hagrid mumbled, shaking Vernon's hand, his own hand engulfing Vernon's to the wrist. "Just here for Harry. Got his letters, I expect." "We certainly did," Petunia trilled, bustling forward. "Would you care for some tea, Mr. Hagrid? Or perhaps a butterbeer? We make our own. It's cream soda with a bit of butterscotch syrup, a family recipe." Hagrid's bushy eyebrows shot up into his hairline. "Butterbeer? Well, I wouldn't say no." He stepped fully into the house, ducking his head, and his presence seemed to shrink the room by half. His eyes finally landed on Harry, who was sitting frozen at the table. A slow, kind smile spread across Hagrid's face, crinkling the corners of his eyes. "And there he is," the giant said, his voice rumbling with warmth. "Harry, last time I saw ya were only a baby. Ya look a lot like your dad. But yevi got your mum's eyes." This was the first time anyone had ever said that to Harry. The Dursleys only ever talked about how much he looked like the idealized hero version of James Potter they'd constructed from magazine articles. Hearing this simple, personal observation felt real. It was a lifeline of authenticity in his ocean of manufactured hype. Before Harry could say anything, Vernon clapped Hagrid on his immense back. A fine young man, isn't he? We've taken great care of him. Spared no expense. The best of everything. He's been practicing his incantations daily. Show him, Harry. Show Mr. Hagrid the Wingardium Leviosa we've been working on. Harry felt his entire body clench with mortification. Uncle Vernon, please. Nonsense. Vernon boomed. The boy's a natural. Just a bit shy. Needs to build his confidence before he's facing down dragons and dark lords. Hagrid? Hagrid was staring at Vernon as if he'd just started speaking gobbledygook. His gaze drifted from Vernon's beaming face to Petunia, who was now holding up the camera, to the disastrous cake on the table. He seemed to be struggling to process the scene. He had come here on a solemn mission from Albus Dumbledore to retrieve a poor, possibly mistreated orphan from the clutches of magic-hating muggles. He had found, instead, the presidents of the Harry Potter fan club. Right, Hagrid said slowly, his brain visibly creaking under the strain. He turned back to Harry, his expression a mixture of pity and utter bafflement. He pulled a slightly squashed box from the pocket of his moleskin coat. Got something for ya. Afraid I might have sat on it at some point, but it'll taste all right. He handed the box to Harry. Inside was a large, sticky chocolate cake with Happy Birthday Harry written on it in green icing. It was simple. It was real. It was the best present Harry had ever received. He looked up at the giant, a genuine smile touching his lips for the first time all day. Thank you. It's not every day a young man turns 11, is it? Hagrid said, his own smile returning as he focused solely on Harry, momentarily blocking out the bizarre Dursley dimension surrounding them. We'll have to get ready, Hagrid continued, his voice dropping into a more official tone. Got to get down to Diagon Alley. Get your books and wand. Diagon Alley, Dudley shouted, popping up from behind the sofa. Can I come? I want to see Gringotts. Do the goblins really have laser-guided security trolls like it says in Wizarding Fortunes magazine? Laser what? Hagrid asked, his confusion returning tenfold. Of course we're all coming, Vernon declared, puffing out his chest. We wouldn't miss Harry's first trip for the world. It's a pivotal moment in the hero's journey. We need to document it for his biography. Hagrid's face fell. He looked from the manic, grinning faces of the Dursleys to Harry's look of pure, unadulterated horror. The boy was pale, his eyes wide with a silent, desperate plea. The gentle giant finally understood. The problem wasn't that Harry Potter was being abused. The problem was that he was being loved to death. A weary sigh escaped Hagrid's lips, a sound like a slow leak in a massive tire. This was going to be a much, much longer day than he had anticipated. Harry stared down at his simple, squashed cake from Hagrid, then at the ridiculous, over-the-top cauldron cake from the Dursleys. His first real taste of the magical world, and he was bringing his fan club with him. He had never wanted to disappear more in his life. Chapter 2. The Pandemonium of Diagon Alley. The journey to London was, in Harry's opinion, the single most excruciating car ride of his young life. It wasn't the traffic, nor was it Hagrid, who had somehow managed to fold his enormous frame into the back of the Dursleys sedan, his knees level with his ears and his head brushing the ceiling. The true agony was the non-stop, high-volume, and deeply misinformed commentary from the front seats. Now, Petunia, are you quite sure about the exchange rate? Vernon boomed, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. He had changed into what he called his wizarding Muggle liaison attire, a tweed jacket with elbow patches over a violently purple polo shirt. The last issue of The Practical Sorcerer suggested a fluctuating galleon-to-pound market. I don't want to be swindled by some back-alley warlock. The rate is fixed, Vernon. It's managed by the goblins, Petunia replied, not looking up from a glossy magazine titled Wizarding Wardrobe Weekly. Honestly, you should read the financial columns. What's more concerning is the current trend in casual robes. Apparently, celestial patterns are out. It's all about minimalist earth tones this season. Harry dear, I do hope you're not set on stars. Harry, wedged between a giant and his equally large cousin, muttered, I'll wear a sack if it's quiet. Dudley, clad in a t-shirt that read, Muggle Bodyguard, do not apparate suddenly, patted Harry's shoulder with a hand the size of a dinner plate. Don't you worry, Harry. I've been practicing my anti-jinx maneuvers. He then demonstrated, performing a clumsy forward roll motion in his seat that sent a tremor through the car and earned a sharp yelp from Vernon. "Dudley, for heaven's sake. You'll dislodge the master cylinder." Hagrid, bless him, remained mostly silent, his brow furrowed as he observed the Dursleys with the fascinated horror of a naturalist discovering a new, bafflingly loud species. He had tried to explain that they could have taken the night bus, or even used a bit of flu powder, but Vernon had insisted on maintaining a dignified Muggle presence. Their destination was a grimy, unassuming pub tucked between a bookshop and a record store. The sign hanging above the door was so faded it was barely legible. "The Leaky Cauldron." "Right," Vernon declared, puffing out his chest as he got out of the car. "Time to interface with the indigenous magical population. Everyone look sharp. And remember the lingo." Harry wanted the ground to swallow him whole. As they entered, a wave of stale beer and old pipe smoke washed over them. The pub was dark and shabby, filled with a strange assortment of patrons. Wizened old crones sipping sherry, cloaked wizards discussing what sounded like dragon breeding regulations, and a goblin in the corner reading a newspaper. All conversation ceased as the Dursleys, with Hagrid looming behind them, made their entrance. "Good morrow, fellow magic folk," Vernon bellowed, striding towards the bar. A few wizards choked on their drinks. "A round of your finest buttered ale for my party. We are here on official Hogwarts business." The bartender, a stooped and toothless man named Tom, stared blankly. "It's butter asterisk beer asterisk, mate. And it's a bit early for a round, ain't it?" "Nonsense." Petunia sniffed, peering critically at a witch's crooked hat. According to a connoisseur's guide to magical mixology, butterbeer is a perfectly acceptable mid-morning restorative, and that hat is a frightful breach of the 1709 Edict of Sartorial Simplicity. Harry's face burned. He could feel every eye in the room on them. He saw a witch whisper to her friend, who then craned her neck to get a better look. Hagrid, sensing Harry's distress, clapped a heavy hand on Vernon's shoulder. "All right, Vernon, no need fair scene. We're just passing through." He led the bewildered family towards the back of the pub, into a small, walled courtyard with nothing but a dustbin and a few weeds. "A dead end," Vernon grumbled. "Is this some sort of magical misdirection? A test of our worthiness?" "Something like that," Hagrid grunted. He pulled out his pink umbrella and tapped a specific sequence of bricks on the wall. The bricks began to tremble and shift. A small hole appeared, growing wider and wider, until it formed a grand archway revealing a bustling, hidden street. Diagon Alley. For a single, breathtaking moment, Harry forgot his embarrassment. The street was a vibrant, chaotic symphony of sights and sounds. Pointed hats bobbed through the crowds, owls hooted from the rafters of an Aesop's Owl Emporium, and the air hummed with excited chatter and the distant clanging of a blacksmith. A group of children pressed their faces against the window of quality Quidditch supplies, staring at the new Nimbus 2000. The scent of parchment, strange herbs, and roasting nuts filled the air. It was more real, more alive, than any picture in his magazines. It was magic. Then, the Dursleys spoke. "Good heavens, the zoning here is a catastrophe," Vernon exclaimed, his eyes wide. "No clear demarcation between commercial and residential properties. And look at that building, it's leaning. A clear violation of Muggle, non-magical building codes. Oh look, Dudley, it's a real cauldron shop." Petunia pointed, her previous critiques forgotten in a wave of pure fandom. "Just like the one advertised in the Daily Prophet. They have the new self-stirring model. Do you think it comes with a warranty?" Dudley, meanwhile, had his eyes fixed on a dark, narrow shop with a sign that read, "Nocturne Alley." He cracked his knuckles. "Looks dodgy. I'll keep an eye on it." Hagrid sighed, the sound like a deflating leather armchair. "First stop, Gringotts. Can't buy anything without money." Gringotts Wizarding Bank was an imposing snow-white building that towered over the smaller shops. As they passed through the bronze doors, Vernon let out a low whistle. Now this is more like it. Proper architectural integrity. The interior was even more impressive, with a vast marble hall and long counters where creatures with clever, swarthy faces were busy weighing coins and examining jewels. "Goblins," Hagrid whispered. "Extraordinary," Vernon breathed. Are they the board of directors? He marched straight up to the nearest available goblin, who was scrutinizing a ruby with a jeweler's loupe. "Good morning, my fine fellow," Vernon said far too loudly. "Vernon Dursley. I'm the, shall we say, Muggle financial advisor for the Potter estate. I'd like to discuss the long-term investment strategy for my nephew's assets. Are you offering competitive interest rates on fixed-term magical artifact bonds?" The goblin slowly lowered his loupe and fixed Vernon with a beady, malevolent stare. "We are a bank, not a marketplace." "He means no harm," Hagrid interjected quickly, shoving Vernon aside. "We're here to take some money out of Harry Potter's vault." He presented the small golden key. The goblin, whose nameplate read Griphook, took the key and inspected it. His gaze flickered to Harry, a flicker of recognition in his dark eyes. "Very well. Follow me." The cart ride through the subterranean tunnels was a wild, stomach-lurching affair that left Petunia pale and Vernon gripping the sides with a mixture of terror and exhilaration. "The infrastructure is magnificent," he yelled over the screeching of the wheels, though the health and safety regulations are clearly a bit lax. When the cart finally shuddered to a halt before a heavy iron door, Griphook unlocked it to reveal a sight that stunned them all into silence. Inside the vault were not just a few coins, but mountains of them. Piles of golden galleons, silver sickles, and bronze nuts. Harry stared, his mind reeling. He had parents. He knew that, of course. But this was tangible proof. This gold was theirs, left for him. It was the first real, undeniable connection he'd ever felt to the two people he only knew from a single, fading photograph. Vernon, however, recovered first. His eyes gleamed as he began to mentally calculate. By Jove, the sheer liquidity. Petunia, with this kind of capital, he could corner the market on dragon liver. Hagrid hastily filled a leather pouch with coins, steering the Dursleys out before they could cause an international incident with the Goblin Nation. Back on the sunlit cobblestones of the alley, Harry felt dazed. He was rich. He was a wizard. It was all real. Maybe, just maybe, he could find his place here. Their next stop was Madame Malkin's robes for all occasions. While Hagrid went off to get a pick-me-up at the Leaky Cauldron, promising to meet them later, Petunia steered Harry inside with the fervor of a seasoned personal shopper. The shop was filled with bolts of fabric in every color and texture, and the quiet snipping of enchanted scissors. Madame Malkin, a smiling, squat witch, immediately began to measure a mortified Harry. "Hogwarts, dear," she asked cheerfully. "Got the lot here. Another young man being fitted up just now, in fact." She gestured with her tape measure towards the back of the shop, where a boy with a pale, pointed face and slick, silver-blonde hair was standing on a stool. He was looking at his reflection in the mirror with an air of immense satisfaction. "Now, Harry, let's discuss fabric choices," Petunia began, pulling out her magazine. "A wool cashmere blend is classic, but Wizarding Wardrobe says acromantula silk offers superior breathability during strenuous charms practicals. And I want to see the protective enchantments," Vernon added, peering at a nearby robe. "What's the warding rating on these things? Are they proof against, say, a level 3 hex?" The boy on the stool turned his head slowly. His gray eyes swept over the Dursleys with an expression of profound disgust, lingering for a moment on Dudley's Muggle bodyguard t-shirt before finally settling on Harry. "Is this a robe shop or a Muggle menagerie?" the boy asked, his voice a bored, aristocratic drawl. Vernon's face turned puce. "Now see here, you young whippersnapper. We are the official guardians of Harry Potter. Show some respect." The boy's eyebrows shot up. A slow, condescending smirk spread across his face. "Potter? You're Harry Potter." He looked Harry up and down, his gaze dismissive. "I'd heard the savior of our world was being raised by Muggles. I hadn't imagined it would be so auditory." He stepped down from the stool, his own perfectly tailored robes swishing around him. He circled them like a predator, assessing an unusual and slightly smelly piece of prey. "My name is Cassius Malfoy," he said, as if the name itself should have them bowing. "My family is one of the oldest and most respected in the wizarding world. We believe in tradition. In dignity." He flicked an invisible piece of lint off his shoulder. "Things your sort clearly wouldn't understand." "My sort?" Harry said, his voice quiet. Oh yes, Cassius sneered, his eyes glinting with malice. He gestured vaguely at the Dursleys, surrounded by these creatures, shouting about interest rates and fabric blends, tainting a sacred place like Diagon Alley with their tacky, mundane concerns. He leaned in closer to Harry, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. It's embarrassing, don't you think? The great Harry Potter reduced to this. A sideshow with loud, tasteless Muggle keepers. Harry felt a strange, hot tide of anger rising in his chest. He'd spent years being embarrassed by the Dursleys. He'd dreamed of escaping their overbearing, smothering fanaticism. He agreed with every word Cassius was saying. They were loud. They were tacky. They were embarrassing. But hearing it from this smug, silver-haired boy was different. They're my family, Harry said, the words feeling foreign and heavy on his tongue. Cassius let out a soft, cruel laugh. Are they? Or are they just your most fervent, idiotic fans? There's a difference, Potter. A true wizarding family would have taught you about pride. About your place in the world. His gaze fell on Dudley, who was now standing stiffly, his fists clenched. Instead, you have that. A lumbering beast in a cotton shirt, pretending to be a guard. How utterly pathetic. Hey, Dudley grunted, taking a step forward. You leave him alone. Cassius didn't even flinch. He simply raised an eyebrow. It speaks. Astonishing. Tell me, do you also perform tricks for galleons? The insult was so sharp, so disdainful, it cut through all of Harry's own resentment. He looked at Dudley, whose face was screwed up in a confused mix of anger and hurt. He saw Petunia, her magazine clutched to her chest, her fangirl enthusiasm finally faltering in the face of such naked contempt. He saw Vernon, for the first time that day, utterly speechless, his blustering confidence punctured. They were ridiculous. They were over the top. They were his only link to a world that had, until now, felt like a fantasy. And this boy, this Cassius Malfoy, was trying to sever it with a sneer. Shut up, Harry said, his voice shaking slightly. Cassius's smirk widened. Or what? Your Muggle will attempt a forward roll at me? You have no power here, Potter. You're just a name, a story. And from where I'm standing, it's a rather disappointing one. The air in the shop suddenly felt cold. A glass jar of buttons on a nearby shelf rattled, then shattered, sending tiny pearl buttons scattering across the floorboards. Cassius jumped back, his look of smug superiority momentarily replaced by surprise. He stared at Harry, then at the broken jar, a new, calculating light entering his gray eyes. Harry stared back, his heart hammering against his ribs. He hadn't meant to do that. He didn't even know how he'd done it. But as he looked at Cassius Malfoy's momentarily stunned face, he felt something he hadn't felt all day. Not wonder, not embarrassment, but a spark of raw, untamed power. For the first time in his life, Harry felt a surge of fierce, unwanted loyalty. And with it, a cold, simmering anger directed not at his family, but at the sneering silver-haired boy who had dared to mock them. This wasn't just about escaping his family's expectations anymore. Now, it was about defending them. Chapter 3. Platform 9 3/4. The 90-minute drive to King's Cross Station was, by Dursley standards, a model of silent, disciplined focus. Vernon gripped the steering wheel as if piloting a fighter jet into hostile territory, his eyes flicking between the road and a heavily highlighted A to Z London map resting on the dashboard. Petunia, in the passenger seat, was methodically checking items off a laminated list titled Operation Hogwarts Deployment. Harry, wedged in the back between Dudley and a mountain of wizarding paraphernalia, wished the car would simply dematerialize. Right, Vernon announced as he pulled into the car park with a screech of tires. Phase 1 complete. Dudley, you're on trunk duty. Petunia, visual confirmation of the target zone. Harry, try to look a bit more heroic, son. Chin up. Shoulders back. You look like you're being sent to a dental appointment. Harry's trunk was a work of art. If your idea of art was a chaotic, sticker bomb disaster. Petunia had insisted on decorating it with glow-in-the-dark stars, puffy stickers of owls that were definitely not the right species, and a large, glitter glue rendering of the Hogwarts crest she'd copied from the Junior Warlocks Weekly. Dudley heaved it onto a trolley with a grunt, his face a mask of grim determination. He was wearing what he called his official bodyguard attire, a black tracksuit 2 sizes too big, and a pair of dark sunglasses that made him look like a vaguely menacing potato. They bustled into the station, a tidal wave of Muggle enthusiasm in a sea of unsuspecting commuters. Vernon, now wearing a whistle around his neck, led the charge. According to my research, and I've cross-referenced 3 separate fan forums, the portal is located between platforms 9 and 10. The key is confidence. A firm, steady pace. No hesitation. It's a test of wizarding nerve, you see. Harry's heart hammered against his ribs. He'd read all about the platform, of course. He knew you just had to walk straight at the brick barrier. But knowing it and doing it were 2 different things, especially when your family was treating it like a televised sporting event. Right, Harry, Petunia said, dabbing a handkerchief at the corner of her eye. She produced a small, disposable camera. Just 1 picture before you cross over. For the scrapbook. The flashbulb was blinding. Harry flinched, the mortification so acute it felt like a physical heat crawling up his neck. A few passers-by stared. He's a natural, Vernon boomed, clapping him on the shoulder hard enough to make his teeth rattle. Now on my mark. 3 hot 2. Harry didn't wait for 1. He seized the handle of his trolley and ran, his gaze locked on the solid-looking brickwork. He pushed with all his might, shutting his eyes, bracing for the bone-jarring impact, for the laughter of the crowd, for the sheer, unadulterated humiliation of it all. But the crash never came. One moment he was in the noisy sunlit hubbub of King's Cross, and the next, he was bathed in the softer light of a hidden platform. A magnificent scarlet steam engine hissed beside a long, crowded platform, billowing clouds of steam that swirled around the legs of witches and wizards in robes of every color. The air buzzed with the hooting of owls and the excited chatter of 100 conversations. For a single, breathtaking second, Harry felt a thrill of pure, unadulterated magic. It was real. It was all real. The moment was shattered by a triumphant roar. He's in. I repeat, the eagle is in the nest. Vernon, Petunia, and Dudley burst through the barrier a moment later, their faces flushed with victory. Dudley, forgetting himself, pumped his fist in the air. Yeah. Score 1 for Team Potter. Several wizards in dignified, dark robes turned to stare at the boisterous Muggles. Harry felt his brief flicker of joy extinguish, replaced by the familiar, leaden weight of embarrassment. He wanted to find the darkest corner of the train and hide until they reached Scotland. Look at it all, pet, Vernon said, his voice thick with emotion. Just like in the magazines. Dudley, secure the perimeter. We need to get Harry a good compartment. A hero's compartment. Preferably one with a window facing the adoring crowds. Dudley took his duties seriously. He shouldered his way through the throng, bellowing, "Make way! Official Potter business! Mind your backs!" While Vernon and Petunia fussed over Harry, straightening his collar and trying to tame his perpetually messy hair with a wetted finger. It was during this frantic, public grooming session that Harry saw him. Leaning against a pillar, flanked by 2 boys who were built like miniature trolls, was Cassius Malfoy. He was just as Harry remembered him from Madame Malkin's, pale, pointy, and radiating an aura of supreme arrogance. But now, his sneer was directed squarely at the Dursley spectacle. His gray eyes met Harry's, and a look of dawning comprehension, followed by pure, unadulterated disgust, spread across his features. He nudged one of his thuggish friends and pointed discreetly with his chin. The message was clear. Look at the company the great Harry Potter keeps. Harry's stomach churned. He pulled away from his aunt. I can get my own compartment, he mumbled, desperate to escape. You should probably go. Nonsense. Petunia chirped. We want to see you off properly. Dudley's found you a spot, come on. Dudley had indeed found an empty compartment. He stood guard at the door, arms crossed, glaring at anyone who so much as glanced in their direction. With a great deal of huffing and puffing, they managed to heave Harry's trunk onto the overhead rack. Right, Vernon said, clapping his hands together. Final briefing. remember what we discussed. Don't trust anyone offering you free potion samples, always check for nargles before sitting down, and if the headmaster offers you a lemon drop, it's a test of character. The correct response is, thank you sir, but my focus is on my studies. And write every day. Petunia added, her voice trembling. I've packed pre-addressed envelopes and a box of owl treats. The deluxe assortment. The final whistle blew, a long shrill shriek that echoed down the platform. Doors began to slam shut. This is it, big guy, Dudley said, thumping Harry's arm. His voice was uncharacteristically soft. Don't let anyone give you any grief. If they do, you just, zap them. It was the most genuine piece of advice Harry had received all day. He managed a small, grateful smile. Thanks, Dud. Vernon and Petunia gave him one last crushing hug before scrambling out of the carriage. But Dudley hesitated. He scanned the compartment one last time, his brow furrowed. Looks secure, he muttered to himself. But you can't be too careful on day one. The train gave a sudden, powerful lurch. Dudley stumbled backwards, losing his balance. The heavy door, caught by the train's momentum, swung shut with a resounding clack, the old-fashioned latch falling firmly into place. There was a moment of stunned silence. Dudley stared at the door. Harry stared at Dudley. From the platform, Vernon's face appeared at the window, his expression of paternal pride rapidly melting into one of pure panic. Dudley! Petunia shrieked from outside, her voice muffled by the glass. Dudley grabbed the handle and twisted. It didn't budge. He threw his considerable weight against the door. It shuddered but held fast. The train was picking up speed now, the faces of his aunt and uncle sliding past the window, their mouths opening and closing in silent, frantic shouts. Oh, brilliant, Harry groaned, sinking onto the seat and putting his head in his hands. He was trapped. On the Hogwarts Express. With his Muggle bodyguard. Don't worry, Harry, I'll handle this, Dudley said, puffing out his chest, though a hint of panic had crept into his own voice. He began pounding on the window. Hey, driver. Stop the train. Muggle on board. I repeat, we have a Muggle on board. It was a nightmare. A waking, rumbling, scarlet and gold nightmare. Harry was already picturing the fallout. The train grinding to a halt. Important-looking wizards striding down the corridor. The humiliation. The whispers. Asterisk Harry Potter. Couldn't even get on the train to school without bringing a Muggle with him. Asterisk. After 10 minutes of fruitless shouting and door rattling, Dudley finally gave up, slumping into the seat opposite Harry with a dejected sigh. Well, he said, adjusting his sunglasses. Guess I'm coming to Hogwarts with you. You can't come to Hogwarts, Harry hissed, his voice trembling with a mixture of anger and despair. You're a Muggle. They'll send you straight back. They'll probably wipe your memory and find my aunt and uncle. They can try, Dudley said grimly, cracking his knuckles. They'll have to get through me first. The sheer, idiotic bravery of it was almost touching. Before Harry could formulate a reply, the compartment door slid open with a sharp rattle. Cassius Malfoy stood there, flanked by the same two hulking boys, Crabbe and Goyle. His lip was curled in a permanent sneer that seemed to be his default expression. Well, Cassius drawled, his eyes sweeping over the compartment before settling on Dudley with theatrical disgust. I heard some rather common shouting. It seems the rumors are true. Potter didn't just bring a trunk to Hogwarts, he brought a pet. Crabbe and Goyle snickered stupidly. Harry felt a hot surge of anger. He's my cousin, he snapped, standing up. And we were just leaving. He hoped the lie sounded convincing. Cassius ignored him, his full attention on Dudley. A cousin? He said, circling the word with contempt. My. Look at the size of it. Do they feed you raw meat, or just table scraps? I must confess, I've never seen a Muggle up close before. They're even more fragrant than I imagined. Dudley's face turned a dangerous shade of puce. He wasn't the same boy who used to terrorize the neighborhood, but years of being Vernon and Petunia's beloved son had left him with a very low tolerance for being insulted. He got to his feet, a low growl rumbling in his chest. Who are you calling fragrant? Dudley demanded, balling his hands into fists. Easy, Dud, Harry warned, putting a hand on his cousin's arm. He knew where this was going. Malfoy chuckled, a dry, unpleasant sound. He casually drew a sleek, black wand from inside his robes. It speaks. How quaint. Tell me, Muggle, do you perform tricks? Can you fetch a stick? Or perhaps you just drool and befoul the furniture. That was it. Dudley lunged. It was a classic playground charge. Head down, arms windmilling. For a Muggle boy, it would have been intimidating. For a wizard with a wand, it was pathetic. Asterisk immobulus. Asterisk, Cassius said with a lazy flick of his wrist. Dudley froze mid-stride, his arms and legs locked in place. He tipped forward like a felled tree, landing with a heavy, muffled thump on the floor of the compartment, completely rigid. Only his eyes could move, wide and terrified. Dudley! Harry yelled, dropping to his cousin's side. He pushed at Dudley's shoulder, but it was like trying to move a statue. Crabbe and Goyle held with laughter. Cassius stepped over Dudley's petrified form and looked down his nose at Harry. This is what you bring into our world, Potter? He sneered. This a livestock? My father always said your celebrity was a fluke, a stain on the dignity of the wizarding world. I see now he was being charitable. You and your filthy Muggle family are an embarrassment. Something inside Harry snapped. It wasn't a thought. It wasn't a decision. It was a raw, primal surge of protective fury. All the years of cringing at his family's loud shirts, their badly pronounced spells, their suffocating, obsessive love, it all boiled away in an instant. Cassius wasn't just insulting Harry. He was insulting Petunia's scrapbook, Vernon's laminated lists, Dudley's loyal, stupid, bodyguard sunglasses. He was insulting his family. Leave him alone, Harry said, his voice dangerously quiet. He stood up, placing himself between Cassius and Dudley's prone form. Cassius raised an eyebrow. Or what? You'll have your oafish cousin slobber on my robes. He raised his wand again, pointing it casually at Harry's chest. You're a half-blood who was raised by Muggles. You're no better than him. You're just a disgrace with a famous scar. Harry didn't have his own wand yet. It was packed away in his trunk. He had no spells, no training, nothing but the fury that was now singing in his blood. The lights in the compartment flickered violently. The glass in the windows began to vibrate, emitting a low humming sound. A stack of Quidditch magazines on the seat next to him fluttered as if caught in a gale, their pages whipping back and forth. Cassius's sneer faltered. He took a half step back, his eyes widening slightly. What are you doing? I said. Harry repeated, and this time his voice seemed to echo with a strange new power. Leave him alone. With the last word, an invisible force erupted from him. It wasn't a spell. It was a physical wave of pure, untamed energy. The compartment door slammed shut. Cassius, Crabbe, and Goyle were thrown backwards as if shoved by a giant hand, stumbling out into the corridor in a tangle of limbs. They scrambled to their feet, their faces a mixture of shock and fear. Cassius stared at Harry, his arrogance completely gone, replaced by something that looked suspiciously like terror. He didn't say another word. He just turned and fled, his two goons lumbering after him. The humming in the carriage stopped. The lights steadied. Silence descended, broken only by the rhythmic clatter of the train on the tracks. Harry stood panting, his heart thundering in his chest. A strange tingling sensation coursed through his hands. He looked down at them, half expecting to see them glowing. They were just his hands. But he knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his bones, that the power had come from him. A groan from the floor broke the silence. The spell on Dudley had broken. He pushed himself up, rubbing his arms and looking around in bewilderment. What happened? Dudley asked, his voice shaky. 1 minute that pointy git was, and then it was like the air went all fuzzy. He looked at Harry, his eyes wide behind his sunglasses. Was that you? Harry could only nod, his throat suddenly dry. Dudley stared at him for a long moment. He looked at the empty corridor, at the slightly askew compartment door, and then back at Harry. A slow grin spread across his face. Wicked, he breathed, a newfound respect dawning in his eyes. The tension broke. Harry let out a shaky laugh. He felt drained, but also exhilarated. For the first time, his magic wasn't something to be embarrassed by or a skill to be memorized from a book. It was his. It was a part of him, a shield he could use to protect the very people he'd spent his whole life trying to get away from. The rattling of a trolley outside announced the arrival of the witch with the cart. "Anything off the trolley, dears?" she asked, her warm smile a beacon of normalcy in the wake of the chaos. Harry looked at Dudley, who was still looking at him with awe. He felt in his pocket for some wizarding money, the strange, heavy coins a comforting weight in his palm. He was on a train to a magical school, with his accidentally kidnapped Muggle cousin, having just fought off a pure-blood bully with a blast of accidental magic. He had spent his whole life running from the legend of the boy who lived. Now, for the first time, he wondered if he was finally ready to meet him. Chapter 4: The Hat, the Choice, and the Family Portrait. The tremor of the Hogwarts Express shuddering to a halt was a mercy. For the rest of the journey from London, a thick, suffocating silence had filled their compartment. Cassius Malfoy, nursing his pride and a faintly swelling cheek, had glared daggers that bounced harmlessly off Dudley's bewildered but resolute expression. Harry, meanwhile, was wrestling with a disquieting new sensation. The magic that had lashed out hadn't felt like the clumsy mispronounced spells from Wizarding Weekly's fun-size grimoire for beginners. It had felt like a part of him, a coiled muscle he hadn't known he possessed, which had sprung to a defense he hadn't consciously commanded. It was terrifying and, if he was being honest, exhilarating. For his years over here. Hagrid's booming voice sliced through the cacophony of the Hogsmeade station platform. A wave of relief so profound it nearly buckled Harry's knees washed over him. Hagrid was real. He was solid. He wasn't a caricature from a fan magazine or a subject of one of Aunt Petunia's breathless theories. "I've read, Harry, that half-giants are actually descended from ancient mountain spirits who fell in love with particularly tall witches. Isn't that romantic?" He was just Hagrid, his beetle-black eyes crinkling in a warm, genuine smile as he spotted Harry in the throng. "All right there, Harry," he rumbled, his presence a comforting shield against the curious stares and hushed whispers that followed Harry like a cloak. "I'm fine," Harry managed, falling into step beside the giant. Dudley, looking profoundly out of his element amidst the sea of black robes and pointed hats, stuck close. "Is this part of the orientation tour?" he asked Hagrid in a loud whisper. "Dad said there'd be a comprehensive welcome package." Hagrid chuckled, a sound like rocks tumbling downhill. "Something like that, Dudley. Something like that." The path to the great, dark lake was steep and narrow. Harry found himself in a bobbing, rickety boat with Dudley and a nervous, round-faced boy named Neville Longbottom, who seemed to have misplaced a toad. Dudley, ever the pragmatist, immediately began inspecting the boat's structural integrity. "These seem a bit rustic," he noted, tapping a damp plank. "No life vests? Dad would have a fit." Health and safety regulations are very clear on aquatic transport. But Harry wasn't listening. As their little flotilla rounded a bend, it happened. Hogwarts Castle rose before them, a breathtaking silhouette of turrets and towers against a canopy of stars, so bright they looked like spilt diamonds. He'd seen this picture 1,000 times. It was on his duvet cover, the commemorative plates Aunt Petunia bought. The Hogwarts class of 1998 sweatshirt Uncle Vernon had already had custom-made for him. 3 sizes too big. For room to grow into a proper hero, my boy. But none of it, not a single glossy photograph or artist's rendering, had captured the sheer, overwhelming reality of it. The light spilling from its windows wasn't just yellow. It was warm and alive. The stones weren't just gray. They held the weight of centuries. This wasn't a theme park. It wasn't a backdrop for his family's fantasy. It was real. For the first time, a flicker of something other than resentment took root in his chest. They were led through great oak doors into the entrance hall, its stone walls flickering with torchlight. A tall, severe-looking witch in emerald green robes stood at the top of a grand marble staircase. Her expression was so stern it could have cut glass. Harry knew instantly who she was. Professor Minerva McGonagall. According to a particularly fanciful article Aunt Petunia had clipped and framed, her animagus form wasn't just a cat, but a magical cat who secretly advised the Minister for Magic on feline-related policies. "Welcome to Hogwarts," said Professor McGonagall. The start of term banquet will begin shortly, but before you take your seats in the Great Hall, you will be sorted into your houses. The sorting is a very important ceremony because, while you are here, your house will be something like your family within Hogwarts. Harry flinched at the word family. He had a family. A loud, embarrassing, suffocatingly enthusiastic family who were probably, at that very moment, laminating his Hogwarts letter to hang in the hallway. The professor explained the 4 houses: Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw, and Slytherin, and the House Cup. Harry knew it all, of course. Uncle Vernon had already built a crude, lopsided replica of the House Cup out of tinfoil and a garden gnome, placing it on the mantelpiece in anticipation. He tuned out the rest of her speech, his attention snagged by the whispers rippling through the crowd of first years. They weren't just staring at his scar anymore. They were staring at Dudley. "Is that a Muggle?" a girl with blonde pigtails whispered. "What's he doing here?" another boy muttered. "This is an outrage." Cassius Malfoy, standing with a pair of hulking boys, smirked. "Don't you know? That's Potter's bodyguard," he said, his voice dripping with condescending amusement. "Probably here to make sure no one scuffs his precious celebrity shoes." Dudley's ears turned bright red. He folded his arms, puffing out his chest in a passable imitation of his father. "I'm his cousin," he announced, his voice a little too loud, "and his security liaison." The snickers grew louder. Harry felt the familiar hot shame creep up his neck. He wanted the floor to swallow him. He wanted to be anyone else, anywhere else. This was his chance to be normal, and the Dursleys, even in their absence, were still finding a way to make it impossible. Professor McGonagall led them through a set of double doors into the Great Hall. It was even more magnificent than the magazines described. Thousands of candles floated in midair above 4 long tables, and the ceiling was a vast, velvety black, dotted with the same stars they'd seen outside. It was magic, pure and undiluted, and for a moment, it stole his breath away. Then he saw the sorting hat on a 3-legged stool at the front. It looked exactly like the replica Dudley had tried to make for him out of an old sun hat and some brown felt. The sight brought the Dursleys crashing back into his mind. One by one, Professor McGonagall called the names. Abbott Hannah went to Hufflepuff. Bones Susan joined her. As each student was sorted, a section of the hall would erupt in cheers. Harry's stomach twisted itself into a knot, so tight he could barely breathe. He knew where he was supposed to go. It was a foregone conclusion, a truth universally acknowledged by everyone at number 4 Privet Drive. He was a Gryffindor. His parents were Gryffindors. The boy who lived, the hero in training, had to be in the House of the Brave. Uncle Vernon had given him a 2-hour lecture on the importance of Gryffindor grit, complete with a PowerPoint presentation he'd somehow made at his drilling firm. Malfoy Cassius. Cassius sauntered up to the stool with an air of supreme confidence. The hat had barely touched his silver blonde hair before it bellowed, "Slytherin." The Slytherin table roared its approval. Cassius shot Harry a triumphant, smug look as he went to join them. Of course. The house of the ambitious, the cunning, the purebloods who looked down on people like his family. People who saw Dudley not as a loyal cousin, but as a walking, talking embarrassment. The list dwindled. Neville Longbottom was, after a long and silent deliberation, finally placed in Gryffindor. Then, the name everyone was waiting for. Potter Harry. The Great Hall didn't just whisper. It fell into a profound, ringing silence. Every single eye was on him. It felt like standing in the harsh glare of 100 spotlights. He walked toward the stool on legs that felt like jelly, his heart hammering against his ribs. He could feel the weight of it all. The wizarding world's expectations, his family's obsessive dreams, the crushing pressure to be the hero they all wanted. He sat down, and Professor McGonagall lowered the frayed, ancient hat over his eyes. The world went dark and musty. A small voice whispered in his ear. Difficult. Very difficult. Plenty of courage, I see. Not a bad mind either. There's talent, oh my goodness, yes, and a nice thirst to prove yourself. Now that's interesting. So where shall I put you? Harry squeezed his eyes shut. Just get it over with, he thought desperately. Put me in Gryffindor and let's be done. Gryffindor, Asterisk, said the voice. Asterisk, you do well there, it's true. It's where everyone expects you to go. Your family certainly does. I can see them now. A banner made of bedsheets, a cake shaped like a lion, very enthusiastic. Asterisk. Harry cringed so hard his teeth hurt. The hat could see that? It could see the Dursleys' fanatical shrine in his second bedroom? But there's something else here. The hat continued, its tone thoughtful. Asterisk, something hidden. Cunning. A will to survive. Forged not in a great battle, but in a small house with floral wallpaper. You've learned to navigate, to manipulate, to get what you need without anyone ever quite realizing it. You had to keep your sanity. That, my boy, is the mark of a Slytherin. Asterisk. Slytherin? The thought was a splash of icy water. The house of Cassius Malfoy? The house everyone associated with dark wizards? Yes, the hat mused. Asterisk, Slytherin would help you on the way to greatness. No doubt about that. It would give you a power all your own, separate from the legend of the boy who lived. It would be a rebellion. A way to finally cast off the suffocating mantle your family has draped over you. You could be your own man, not their hero. Asterisk. The offer was intoxicating. A path that was entirely his. A way to tell Uncle Vernon and his Gryffindor PowerPoint presentation to get stuffed. A way to show the entire world that he was not a pre-packaged celebrity. He was Harry. Just Harry. He could carve his own name into the world, far from the shadow of the one he'd been given. All the resentment, the years of quiet embarrassment, the desperate yearning for a normal identity, coalesced into a single, powerful temptation. He pictured Cassius's sneering face. He imagined sharing a common room with him, listening to his pure-blood dogma day in and day out. But then he pictured something else. Dudley, standing on the train, his fists clenched, ready to take on 3 wizards with nothing but misplaced loyalty. Dudley, who had worn that ridiculous "my cousin is the chosen one, and all I got was this lousy t-shirt" shirt for a solid week. Uncle Vernon, who had tried to brew a potion of fortitude in the kitchen sink using gravy granules and tonic water. Aunt Petunia, who read every wizarding magazine cover to cover, her eyes shining with a desperate, second-hand pride. They were ridiculous. They were mortifying. Their love was a clumsy, smothering, over-the-top performance. But it was love. And on the train, when Cassius had insulted Dudley, what had he done? He hadn't thought about his reputation or what house he'd be in. He had acted. He had protected his cousin. His family. Not because a hero was supposed to, but because a part of him, deep down, needed to. Choosing Slytherin would be a reaction. Just another way of letting the Dursleys define him by running in the opposite direction. It wasn't freedom. It was just a different kind of cage. The real act of rebellion, the real choice, wasn't to reject the label they'd given him, but to reclaim it, to make it his own. He could be brave. He could be a Gryffindor. But he would do it on his own terms, for his own reasons. Not because it was expected, but because it was who he was. Not Slytherin, Harry thought, a sudden, fierce clarity washing over him. Asterisk, not Slytherin. Please. Asterisk. Asterisk, not Slytherin, you say? Asterisk, the hat sounded surprised, perhaps even a little impressed. Asterisk, are you sure? You could be great, you know. It's all here in your head, and Gryffindor comes with so much baggage. So many expectations. Asterisk. I'll handle it, Harry thought, a new resolve hardening in his chest. Asterisk, I'll make it mine. Please. Gryffindor. Asterisk. There was a pause, a moment of consideration, and then the hat seemed to sigh. It shouted the last word to the silent hall. Gryffindor. An explosion of sound erupted from the table on the far left. The Weasley twins were on their feet, yelling, "We got Potter! We got Potter!" Percy, the prefect, was shaking his hand with stiff formality. The entire table was cheering, clapping him on the back as he slid onto the bench, his face flushed. He looked over at the staff table and saw Hagrid give him a huge, beaming smile and a thumbs up. He even thought he saw a glimmer of approval in Professor McGonagall's stern eyes. He glanced at the Slytherin table. Cassius Malfoy was staring at him, his mouth a thin line of disbelief and disgust, as if Harry had just committed the ultimate act of betrayal by conforming to the most obvious cliché. The food appeared magically on the golden plates, a feast grander than anything Harry had ever imagined. Roast beef, chicken, potatoes of every kind, vegetables, and jugs of pumpkin juice. As he piled his plate high, a ghost purled through the table, groaning about a run-in with the bloody Baron. An owl swooped low, narrowly missing a gravy boat. It was loud, chaotic, and wonderful. He felt a sense of belonging that was entirely different from the manufactured version at home. Here, he wasn't a celebrity on a pedestal. He was just another new Gryffindor, one first year among many. It was normal. After the feast, Dumbledore rose to his feet. "Ahem," he said, his voice carrying easily through the hall. "Just a few more words now that we are all fed and watered. I have a few start-of-term notices to give you. First years should note that the forest on the grounds is forbidden to all pupils. And a few of our older students would do well to remember that as well." His twinkling eyes drifted towards the Weasley twins. "I have also been asked by Mr. Filch, the caretaker, to remind you all that no magic should be used between classes in the corridors. Quidditch trials will be held in the second week of the term. Anyone interested in playing for their house team should contact their house captain." He paused, his gaze sweeping over the students, a serious note entering his voice. "And finally, I must tell you that this year, the third-floor corridor on the right-hand side is out of bounds to everyone who does not wish to die a very painful death." A few students laughed, but most, including Harry, stared at the headmaster, unsure if he was joking. He seemed perfectly serious. As the chatter resumed and the prefects began to herd the first years out of the hall, Harry felt a strange, faint prickle on his forehead, right on the edge of his scar. It wasn't pain, not the searing agony from the stories his aunt and uncle told. It was more like a whisper of static, a distant hum, a sudden, inexplicable feeling that Dumbledore's warning, unlike the Dursleys' dramatic reenactments of his past, was a peril that was terrifyingly, undeniably real. He took one last look around the Great Hall, at the floating candles and the enchanted ceiling. He thought of his room at Privet Drive, with its Gryffindor-themed wallpaper and the framed photo on his bedside table, a magical portrait of him, Vernon, Petunia, and Dudley, all waving stiffly in mismatched scarlet and gold scarves. He had expected to feel nothing but relief at being so far away from it. Instead, a small, wry smile touched his lips. It was all utterly mad. But as he turned to follow his new housemates to the Gryffindor common room, he felt, for the first time in his life, completely and truly free. The real adventure was just beginning, and for better or for worse, he would face it as Harry Potter. Not the legend, not the fan favorite, but as himself. And he was finally okay with that.